Well, guys, let's go ahead and get started. It's great to see everybody. My name is Andrew Pryfogle. I'm the founder and CEO of CX Effect. I'm here on this webinar with Sam Krut. Sam is co-founder and chief revenue officer at one of the coolest suppliers in our portfolio, Flip. Sam, welcome.
Hey, yeah, great to see you, Andrew. Thanks for having me on today.
Indeed. Looking forward to our conversation. We'll remove that title slide. We're just gonna talk one-on-one and then take some questions from the audience. But Sam, let's start, if you could. Give us a little quick backgrounder on Flip. You guys are formally known as Red Route, and you changed your name some months back. Really excited about what you guys are doing. We're both co-founders of companies, of startups. We have that in common. It's a crazy path to go down. I'd love to hear your journey real quick. Tell us a little bit about Flip.
Yeah, absolutely. So Flip strives to make voice automation accessible to brands, companies of all sizes. So we've all had great experiences with voice automation. We've had really poor experiences with voice automation, and we try to make the former. We make the former accessible to companies of all sizes. This is an especially interesting conversation to us because we were there at the ground floor of voice automation and all of the technologies surrounding where voice automation has coming out. So everything from the transcription engines finally getting to a good place in 2016, 2017. When we started the company as a research project out of Cornell University. We saw the revolution in natural language processing, now dialogue management and everything going on with GPT. So this is a particularly interesting conversation.
Yeah, no doubt. The pace of innovation around artificial intelligence has just been mind-boggling. You guys have been doing this for a few years now, but the technology, where it's evolved since when you first started Flip, give us some sense of that, man.
Yeah,
it's been extreme.
Yeah, so Google kind of really shook things up in 2016, 2017 with their transcription engine, which really became the forefront of being able to actually interact with somebody on the other line. And we were original beta testers there. I remember when it was mind-boggling to us if Google got something right. And then I would seriously be like, whoa, how did it get that? And then a few years later, we got to a point where it was getting things right that the human ear couldn't even get anymore. And so seeing that pace of innovation was quite exciting. And then we got to a place where, okay, the transcription engines, they're able to transcribe things well, but after it was transcribed, then the natural language processing portion of it did not know what to do anymore. And so the experience still sucked. And then seeing that problem get solved was, okay, we're onto something. But now the experience on the other end, after we've identified, hey, this is why somebody's calling, this is what somebody wants. And that experience wasn't very good. And obviously, everybody I think on this call is probably privy to all the innovation now happening on that end of things. So it's definitely been an interesting journey.
Sure. Yeah, no doubt. It's interesting. Once we take a voice call, we're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail in a moment. But we take a voice call, we use AI to transcribe that into a body of text. Once it's there, it can be worked into a large language model that you can apply AI to do some really, really cool things. You're doing a lot more than just say sales or say support, press one or say sales, or press two or say support. The basic kind of voice IVR, you're actually reaching resolution on calls using artificial intelligence, which is super, super important. Describe that real quick. I know I've oversimplified it a bit, but describe that really quick, and then I'll go deeper on it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we, as a fundamental concept since we started the company, how traditionally automating and resolving calls has been done is through flows. And for anyone being in the CX space for quite a while, we think of everything, especially when you speak with more senior CX leaders, everything in traditional flows. The problem with traditional flows is if you and I were having a conversation today and we needed to resolve something, if I just took out a notepad and was, okay, Andrew, you said this, so I'm going to say that, you'd be like, what is wrong with this person? Yet that's the approach that we take with computers. And so we said, can we flip that script? And if we go to the end, to the resolution, and work backwards from there, what do we need to do? And so we got into this concept of configurations instead of flows. And so what that is if we know somebody needs calls about where's my order, let's work backwards from there. What are the various configurations or the various fields or things that we need to present in order to fulfill that resolution? And then let's work backwards a step from there and say, how are we going to now present this information in order to do so? And then where you land almost always is you need to do this dynamically, and it changes based on the different aspects of the request. And that's how you then can get to that better resolution.
Yeah, got it. Resolution, Sam, is so critical here because as you guys are fully aware, you've built your business around voice as the preferred channel. And I would suppose there are parties out there that might debate whether voice is the preferred channel. Certainly companies that abandoned voice a long time ago, right? That walked away from voice a long time ago saying just too expensive to support. It's as a matter of fact, let's hide our phone number. Let's make it really difficult for people to find us and force them into these self-service experiences, frankly, most of which are really, really poor and end in high frustration. You used the term flip the script a bit ago. You guys have certainly done that around voice. You believe that voice is now it's reemerging as the preferred channel. Talk about that for a moment.
Well, yeah, I think the easiest way to look at it is brands. There's no questions. Brands have actively tried to hide their phone line. And as a consumer, we just take our, if I take my biased hat off for a sec, which can be a little difficult, I do prefer to get on with a human being if I can. Right. I do believe to have that voice interaction. Voice is the most innate interaction we have as human beings. We learn to speak far before we learn how to read. So if we can do that at scale, there's no question it's a better CX experience. The other direction I'd go is if you put a phone number side by side next to a chat window, people are going to call that phone number. That's why we actively hide it. If people weren't using it, then there would be no reason to hide it. So there's no question there's consumer demand. So we just listen to the customer and we say, okay, what does the customer want? Plus, what is the most natural interaction that we have as human beings? It's not a very large logical leap to go and say, okay, voice is something that a really good brand, especially in a hyper competitive market, needs to support and do very well.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sam, a lot of brands decide to move away from voice because they think it's too expensive to man or to staff an entire contact center to handle all those voice calls. And those that have said, well, maybe we can automate on the voice side instead, their automation journeys have not been great. You're fundamentally different from the kind of the legacy voice-driven IVRs that are out there, again, tied to resolution. I want to talk a little bit more about that because your level of confidence that you can automate a very high percentage of calls, especially for e-commerce brands, that makes a world of difference compared to the traditional mentality. If I want to have voice as a primary channel, I got to have a bunch of butts and seats answering calls.
Right. And so I think it goes back to first principle thinking and how the approach we took of this doesn't make a lot of sense. Why are we building things as flows? But we also said, let's bet on ourselves. If we're saying that how historically this has been done is wrong and is not aligned with resolution, well, all aspects of our business and how we interact with the person buying our product, ultimately the brand, the company, whatever it may be, we need to align with that. And so we've actually aligned our pricing model in a way that the industry hasn't seen before. So typically the industry does per minute pricing, which is quite unaligned with what the brand is trying to achieve, right? Consumers don't want to spend a lot of time on the phone. They want a resolution quickly. Yet if you're tying somebody in per minute and you don't care if that call is automated or resolved because you're getting paid nonetheless, there's no incentive to really get that automation to a good place. So we said, if we are confident that we can help brands, let's bet on ourselves. And so we created a pricing model where we are only paid for successful resolution. So what that means is if it goes to the operator, we don't get paid. If the customer is not successfully helped, we don't get paid. And so we're betting on ourselves, keeps us honest, but it also is very easy for the brand to derive value. The amount of calls that we automate, You multiply that by our price, it's far cheaper than the price of a human being. That delta is your cost savings.
Yeah, yeah. I love the simplicity of that. And I love that you guys are making sure those incentives are aligned. On your end, you're then motivated from a tech perspective to continue to develop on that platform and make it smarter, faster, cheaper to process requests and fully resolve calls, because that's how you make your money.
Exactly.
That makes a ton of sense. I love that. Talk to me about some of the back end integrations that need to happen here, because it's more than you're not just deploying your platform as a standalone. The back end systems that are so critical to many e-commerce brands, the order management systems and such. Talk about that for a moment, because that's such a key part of how you deploy your solution.
Yeah. So integrations, and from the early days, building out a strong ecosystem of integration partners has been pretty pivotal to do what we do. So in order to give customers a good experience, you need to have their data, and you need to be able to be dynamic based on the customer experience. So we have something we call internally context aware. When that customer calls, we can identify that customer in the OMS, make sure the experience is tailored to that customer. Let me give you an example. If we have something called a frustrated caller queue. If we have identified somebody coming in and they have a lot of tickets open with the help desk, then we can pretty confidently say, hey, this person's not having a great experience with the brand. Let's handle them both in our voice solution. Let's handle them differently. But if we're also identified that they're not having a great experience with the brand, let's get them to a set of agents very quickly that are perhaps more bubbly, are trained to handle these type of customers. On the other side of it, if we've identified that somebody within a certain amount of time, based on the OMS integration or whatever other integrations we have placed a lot of orders. Well, that's a very loyal customer. So let's change the experience. Let's be more thankful. Let's be more grateful. Let's change how the AI is speaking with them. And so that, alongside with just being able to capture information from these systems and use that in order to automate the call, that paired together is kind of part of that secret sauce that allows us to achieve the automation levels that we're able to achieve.
Yeah, that's amazing. The level of automation, I mean, I've seen deployments that are north of 80% of interactions being automated. That's pretty mind blowing. I'm not sure a voice IVR could claim that.
Yeah, we have customers today doing 85%. Through the pandemic, we had some customers completely shut down their contact center and run everything completely through us end to end. So yeah, it's definitely possible. The brand's willing to invest in it. It's certainly possible.
Back to integrations for a second. What are the back end integrations that are most common? I think of things like Shopify and Zendesk. Talk about that.
Yeah. So on the OMS side, if we go into retail and e-commerce, Shopify, Salesforce is very common. Magento, lesser so these days, but also very common. And then on the help desk side, Zendesk, Customer, Gladly, Gorgeous, Rich Panel. We see quite a bit of those. And then of course, Salesforce Service Cloud is a big one as well.
Got it. The integrations allow for you to stand up new customers surprisingly fast. These out of the box integrations. Speak to that for a moment, because I think there's an expectation, if I'm standing up a really complex multi-turn, natural language understanding IVR, it could take months to deploy, to train and deploy. How do you guys do that so easily?
Yeah, so it comes back again to those first principle thinking and saying we're not going to do flows, we're going to do configurations. Because if you change the name, if you change the configurations and you say, all I need to know is for each intent, how the brand prefers it to be handled, what are the policies, and I configure the system on that rather than build out flows, launching at scale becomes far easier. So our system is able to identify 200 plus intents or topics today that a customer might be calling about. And then what we're doing is now backfilling with the brand preferences. And that ties things in really well with GPT, because one of the biggest applications we see of GPT is right now we have about a few day turnaround from somebody internally. Typically it's scouring their website, filling in all the configs of the policies, coming to the customer and saying, review this. Now we can use GPT to do that even faster. Hey, GPT, train our configurations file. So now we can go ahead present that to the CX leader, whoever's reviewing the configs file. They say, yep, this is aligned with my policies and my procedures internally, and then we can go ahead and deploy that.
Yeah, that's awesome. So that's going to speed up your custom tuning and kind of the machine learning part of this even faster. I saw an article, Sam, I think yesterday it was, a headline that suggested that GPT will affect every single product or service that consumers interact with from here on out. And that's no different for you. You've been thinking hard in your engineering team about how do we leverage generative AI to help scale this platform even more. I'm curious what you think the future of that is for Flow.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's the immediate, what I would call the non-technical impacts, and then there's the technical impacts. The non-technical impacts is, I think, GPT did an amazing, I call it maybe a marketing technique, whatever it was, putting a public-facing GUI out and allowing the world to play with that. Was an amazing marketing tactic, and we immediately saw impact within the first few weeks of that happening and it really becoming a buzz. We saw our automation rates go up, and we were kind of going like, what's going on here? And then we started realizing, because consumers that previously, trust has always been a problem with automation, and because consumers that previously did not trust automation all of a sudden played with GPT and said, hey, these bots are more powerful than we may have given them credit for previously, we saw engagement rates go up and we saw more calls starting to get automated. And that's simply just that trust starting to change. So now the question becomes, okay, as consumer trust is starting to change, as consumers are starting to use GPT in their daily life, how does that impact our product? And we've seen a few things. One is the training configurations. So being able to do that very quickly at scale has been something that is and will continue to allow us to speed up our implementation process. The other things is classification. So right now we're able to identify 200 plus intents automatically. But let's say that makes up 90% of the spread of different intents a brand might get. There's that 10% that right now we're not able to identify, and kind of there's not enough, the juice isn't worth the squeeze with us putting a lot of effort into that 10%. But with GPT, if we can identify it and we can funnel it into GPT, it can help us at scale identify, hey, this is a call that might make up a very small percentage of the calls a brand gets in a year. But if in a matter of minutes, we now can spin up a solution for that, there's no reason the contact center needs to take that phone call. So it always also allows us to start focusing in on the long tail that previously we're not going to be focusing on. And so
keep going.
Yeah, of course. So there's been a few other places that we've incorporated it. One of the most amazing places also the dialogue management piece. So 2017 transcriptions starting to get to a good place, natural language processing starting to get to a good place, but the dialogue management piece has been a part of the puzzle that has not really been solved, and the solutions that are out there have been somewhat lackluster. But what GPT allows us to do is we can say, hey, our voice experts have written the following generic scripts for every single intent, and here are the configurations that this customer, their internal processes and so forth requires. Now go ahead and spin up a dynamic script based on these configs and based on the scripts that we've already written. So from a dialogue management perspective, we see that there could be a lot of really exciting things that are going to come out of GPT.
No doubt. That's very cool. And I would imagine a level of customization at that point by brand, right? So it doesn't all sound the same from brand to brand to brand, and you can really wrap it around kind of the culture of that business. That's really, really cool. I love that. Give us some examples if you could. And by the way, I'm going to pause for a second just to let people know, if you have any questions, pop them into the chat, and we'll be sure to tee those up for Sam. I know we're going to get a few here that are popping up right now. Sam, you've done this very successfully for some very recognizable brands. I'd love for you to give us a couple examples of that. I happen to be a customer of a few of those brands, and so I love to hear about them. Talk about it for a second. Where have you really hit it out of the park with some brands that we know?
Yeah, so we're really. I'd like to think we're proud of all of our implementations, but GNC Vitamins, very recognizable brand that we probably all interacted with. So we about 2 Thanksgivings ago implemented with them, and one of the things that I'm most proud of there is we had from implementation to Thanksgiving about 2 weeks, and our champion at at the brand after that time period said, you saved my ass through Thanksgiving, which coming from a brand
Yeah.
through Thanksgiving is a powerful statement. Other D2C, fast growing D2C brands that we might have all interacted with, Untuckit comes to mind, Brooklyn comes to mind. We usually see when brands are start looking to invest in any type of automation that when they come to voice automation, especially for D2C brands, we're usually the one-stop shop for anything voice related.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. There's a question here that was asked about how large you guys can scale with automation. And you've mentioned a couple of deployments right there that are quite large. How big can this go?
Yeah, so we have no limitation on concurrency. So, and if the brand has a spike, let's say there's, we have some brands we work with that will send out like newsletters or catalogs at the beginning of the month, and then they see a huge spike. No limitations there whatsoever. We kind of think of ourselves as concurrent agents that can scale up and down as the brand needs it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. So no limit on concurrency. So you can go into thousands and tens of thousands of calls without any issue. Let's go back to GNC. There was a question here about what you turned up for them. Specifically, what were they doing prior to Flip? What was the problem that you were trying to solve for?
Yeah, so the big problem is the capacity problem. Not enough agents, too many phone calls. So
Yep.
they had their staffing, they had their budgets for the holidays, they already had so many trained agents. And another big issue, especially with
Yep.
brands, is the seasonality of hiring. So you hire a lot of agents around the holidays, and then you need to start tapering off when the new year comes and your call volume starts going down. And so they wanted a solution they could put in place that would allow them to not need to train as much, not need to taper off as much, and we solved that successfully.
That's awesome. And so the outcome of that was they didn't have to hire as many people
No.
through the holiday season that they normally
In
would.
last holiday season, our contact actually told us that they had zero budget and zero planning to hire any agents for the holiday season. So we helped handle all of their holiday load.
Unreal. That's unheard of, man. I mean, how many retail brands are out there that are multiplying their contact center staff by like 10x come the holidays? You're getting rid of that issue for them. That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
You are also in many cases, because as much as we love voice as a channel, it's not the only channel, right? The digital channels of chat, SMS, email. You can deploy your solution side by side with all those other digital channels, and isn't that most common how you do that?
Yeah, so we have strong partners with every channel, but we also see other channels as potential productive places in order to send the customer. So for example, let's say if the resolution, regardless if it went to an agent, regardless if it's being handled with us, is sending the customer an SMS or sending the customer an email. Deflecting to those channels have times where they can be very powerful. Hey, you want to return this item, you need to fill out a form with your reason, whatever, credit card information, whatever it may be. We can automatically trigger a text, say, hey, look at your phone. All of the return information in the form you need to fill is waiting for you right there.
Wow. So you're tightly integrating, where maybe my preference is to call in, but then you're in that experience, in that journey, you're integrating part of that journey into my smartphone.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah, makes a ton of sense. Great question from Diane here. I'm just going to read this to you because it's a bit long. One of the biggest challenges I have when interacting with a chat-based or AI-based chat bot is that the responses are too limited. It's frustrating that I can't get what I'm looking for, and they have no number published for something that should be easy to answer. How's Flip addressing that challenge differently?
Let me just repeat the question. Responses are too limited and I can't get what I'm looking for. So that comes back to the configurations problem. So the reason why AI feels so limited is because it's built like a flow. And so you're only given the information that the decision maker that built that flow deemed you should have received. But if we go and say, hey, if we work backwards from the resolution and say, in order to receive whatever resolution, you needed all of these pieces of information, and we work backwards from there and we make that information accessible to that resolution, then everything gets filled in and you should be able to get all the information you need. So it's far less limiting and far more
Got it.
dynamic.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so the idea of the flow using the, if this, then that kind of flow goes away, and instead it's based on intent.
Exactly. It's all based on
Got it.
configurations, intent, and resolution. There's absolutely no idea
Yeah.
of flow. And if you go into our portal, it's all based on configuration. So where's my order? Here's the piece of information I have accessible in my OMS. Is there anything you don't want us to get to a customer? Great. That's all we need.
Yeah, love that. Do you generally sit in front of, in the middle of, or behind their traditional IVR that they might have?
We replace the traditional IVR. So we have the ability, based on intent, to route the call to whatever queue you may need if it needs to go to operator. But we completely replace that IVR. There's just no need for it anymore.
Yeah, got it. Got it. See, Diane, I'm inside your brain, just predicting what you're going to ask next. So good job. That's awesome. That's really cool. I love the examples of this. I'm curious. You got your start at Flip. I think your first use case, if I recall, was a cab company, right? Which is, tell that story really quick, because I think it's quite interesting.
Yeah. So we were in college. Looking for something to do, and we built an app. There was no Uber or Lyft in upstate New York, so we built an app where students could go ahead, pretty much request an Uber or Lyft, and then it would go to a local transportation company and just send them the ride. And what we really quickly realized is the bigger problem that was sitting right in front of us the whole time is, yeah, we were giving a lot of app volume to this business, but their contact center, which was a little, I don't want to call it a shack, but a small little building in the woods in upstate New York, was just being inundated day in and day out. During the day, they were getting a lot of medical business, driving elderly people to the hospital and so forth. At night, it was the students trying to go and party. And so that kind of paired really hand in hand with all the innovation happening in the voice industry. We were particularly interested in all of that. Most of the co-founders came from a data background, so voice was the buzzword at the time. So it paired really nicely at the time with, hey, we have a cab company here that has a lot of phone calls, a very progressive owner that was welcoming to us wanting to experiment on it, in parallel with everything happening in the voice industry.
That's awesome. That's so cool. And then you realized pretty early on that this could translate really well with e-commerce brands, and we've talked about those extensively. I'm curious, Sam, where does this go next, man? Where what's the future for Flip outside of perhaps transportation and e-com?
Yeah, so one thing we learned, so we started in transportation. We went everything from automating huge non-emergency medical transportation contact centers all over the place. And then we started identifying, well, what's next? And what we saw with retail and transportation is the types of calls are very similar. Where's my order? Where's my ride? Place a new order, book a new ride, edit an order, edit a ride. And so we saw a lot of similarities. But if you look, a lot of the intents across various verticals, whether you look at healthcare, banking, and so forth, have a lot of similarities. Even though the context and the exact item or thing we're talking about might be a little different, the way that it's asked and the way you return information is almost completely similar. So we are specifically looking for verticals that have, because the integrations are so important to us, have a strong ecosystem of integrations, don't have too many homegrown systems, and receive a lot of phone calls. And as long as a vertical categorically checks all those boxes, it's a great place for Flip to go.
Good. That's awesome. So there's some exciting ones coming out. I know you guys are working on it. We're continuing to kind of float things by you guys as we come up with new customers. That dovetails nicely with Ryan's question about call volume or number of agents in a contact center. Where does it make sense from a size perspective for you guys? Is there a client that's too small? You've already mentioned there's not one that's too big. You don't have a limitation in that, but how about too small? When does this not pencil for a company?
Yeah, I don't think there's any customer that's too small, but the value proposition changes a little bit. So when we're talking about a small contact center, a lot of the time there's extremely high hold time, voicemails on. Sometimes we work with contact centers as small as one agent. and that agent's answering an email, then they're not picking up the phone and so forth. So we've actually built for smaller contact centers a feature, something called NOAA, no operator available handling. So if we try to automate that call, and automation's on 24/7, we try to automate that call and we can't automate that call, well, then we go ahead and take a voicemail-esque transcription. So ask the caller, well, what did you want to call about? I'm sorry, we couldn't help you. We then transcribe that. We open a ticket in the help desk. So when that agent frees up, or whatever group of agents free up, they now can go ahead and see that as a ticket with a full transcription, all the customer's information we pulled from the OMS, waiting for them. They can respond on a channel like email. They can call that customer back, and it's nicely queued up in the help desk for them.
Wow. Wow. So some smaller, like direct to consumer brands that haven't scaled yet, maybe they have a team of 3, 4, 5 people, and their entire way of communicating with customers is via email. I mean, I'm working with a brand like that today actively, so it's really fresh in my mind. And if I have a problem with that brand, my only option is to send them an email, and in a 1 or 2 business days, they're replying back to me. You're helping to solve for that, right? Because my voice call coming in, you're capturing all the necessary information. If you're not able to resolve that entirely, you're opening a ticket and putting it in the right queue for the right person inside of their current ticketing platform. Am I capturing that correctly?
Bingo, exactly. And now we can start doing things like, okay, well, now with the help desk, we can trigger an email saying, hey, we received it. So it doesn't feel like it went into a black box. So we'll respond to you shortly, things like that. So now we can add automated functions in the help desk on top of what we're doing to really close the entire loop on the conversation with the customer.
Yeah, got it. Another good question here about PII and NPI data. How do you handle compliancy, PCI, HIPAA, other scenarios that come up? Talk about that.
Yeah, so one interesting, and I don't know if I necessarily recommend startups to go down that rabbit hole, but we were just chasing the calls at the beginning. So the contact centers that interested us the most were the ones with the most calls. And that very early on brought in the conversation of PII, PHI, HIPAA compliance, and all the other compliance factors. So depending on the type of customer, the type of phone calls they receive, we have different processes internally in order to handle that. So that potentially is verification. So our PHI customers require much more stringent verification policies than our average retail customer, and so forth. And so the system has different things we change in there in order to accommodate the type of phone call.
Got it. So you can, obviously things like PCI compliance with retail brands is a huge priority, and you're able to integrate with their payment systems that they already have in place typically.
Absolutely. Or when we get into the PHI sphere, we can process things like 3-step verification with social security numbers, birthdays, addresses, things like that. So we can get very complex and abide by the requirements of the brand when it comes to verification.
That's awesome. This is such an interesting time right now, Sam. Where GPT is going and where it's going next. I've been telling people that they got to keep pace with this thing. If you're not tracking this and figuring out what it means for your business in just a few short months, you could be way behind. There have been a lot of comments out there about I don't know if doom and gloom is the right phrase, but this idea that if you don't figure out what you're doing with generative AI in your business, you may not be in business. That's the extreme you hear, right? In just 6, 12, 18 months. Do you buy some of that hyperbole? Is some of that real? Or what do you think the runway is for brands that are just now starting to figure out what their strategy is?
Yeah, so I think it's akin to, look, I'm a huge believer in AI. Obviously, I bet my time and a lot of energy and blood, sweat, and tears on AI. But I think there's also a little bit of a buzz around GPT as well. So it comes out, during the mobile app revolution, everybody thought you built a mobile app, you launched on the App Store, you'll become a millionaire. It's not quite. And I think we need to be very cautious with GPT. So like one example that comes to mind is if you go to GPT and you ask for a return policy answer to a brand you perhaps work with, probability is maybe you'll get the right answer, but more often than not, you probably will get something close to, but not the whole entire answer. And that's because GPT is not 100% accurate. GPT is trained on billions of data points that we may not even know what they are. So it might get a return policy off some aggregator on the web. And so it's important to understand the limitations of GPT, and incorporate only the aspects of it that at a technical level make sense for your business. But I also think we need to realize that it's not the end all. It's not the end all solution. It's not going to fix the world's problems. I like to think one of my best friends is a consultant at one of the big firms, and it's taken his workload from 10 hours a day to deck building now is a few hours a day. So there's definitely applications there, but it's also important to have the human eye and understand how it was built, what the limitations are, and make sure you're applying that to your business.
No doubt. And my encouragement to companies out there that are just now starting to think through this strategy, AI is artificial intelligence is a broad term, right? And lots of things fit underneath that. Natural language understanding, natural language processing, generative AI is the latest and greatest that we're all spending time talking about. I love Diane's comment here. Maybe this is an appropriate way to close. She says, if you hate change, you will really hate obsolescence. Right. And so change is hard for businesses and for business leaders, right, to figure out how do we do things differently versus what we've always done. There is some urgency around this because the brands that are really embracing this, that are really embracing how AI can not just lower cost or eliminate human interaction, but actually leveraging AI while still delighting customers. You guys are a big believer in that principle, that you don't have to give up the goal of delighting customers when you deploy automation. Share that with us as a closing topic, Sam.
Yeah, absolutely. So AI, and it's why it's so important to stay at the forefront, continue looking and incorporating the innovation as needed. So if you are deploying it well, and you're taking the aspects of AI that actually speak to the customer experience, that can actually help the customer and aren't just a pure deflection mechanism, but you look at it as, am I making a decision that is better for the customer? Is the customer getting information sooner? Is the customer getting more accurate information? Am I removing the human from the loop in such a way where it's improving the customer experience? If you're making customer experience forward decisions with AI, then the customer wins and your brand wins. And I think it's important in all deployments. It's important whenever you're looking at AI to make sure you're not just winning, but the customer is also winning.
Yes. So important when you're designing this from the get-go. And that's what we spend a lot of our time doing, helping customers accomplish exactly that. We call it delightful automation, Sam. And you guys are right at the core of that. I really appreciate you taking the time. For customers out there that want to learn more about Flip, and how they are flipping the whole conversation around voice. We love what they're doing. We're big fans. You should be too. Check it out at cxbasecamp.com and listen to what Flip is doing to delight customers with automation. It's pretty mind-blowing, and we're excited to have you guys in the portfolio. Sam, great job. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Andrew. It's been a great time.